everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sue LaVigne. I'm the volunteer chapter chair of Sierra Club Maine, and I want to welcome you all here and thank you for coming. I think you're in for a real treat and a great program that we're working on. I just want to give a couple shout outs, a special thanks to our awesome events team who worked tirelessly and hard to get all this together. And I just want to thank all of our volunteers, our activists, our donors, and our supporters who made the progress that we made this year possible. And it's been a real honor to help lead the organization and to see all the good work that's happening. And also, if you like the music that you heard, there's a link in the chat to the Golden Oaks Band. They were amazing. They're a local band, and they offered to let us stream their music to begin our show. I thought I just share my personal philosophy about how we solve this climate crisis. And I believe that we need everyone if we're going to resolve it in a way that's equitable and just for everyone. And that there is a role for everyone and something that each of us can do. And I hope as you listen to this program, and I know you're going to be inspired by the films and our panelists, that you think about what your role is. And we here in Sierra Club Maine, we hope that we can help you figure that out and maybe make you a little less lonely on the work that you do for climate activism. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our MC of the evening, who is Kelsey Johnson, our most awesome volunteer leader and executive committee member. And by day, she's the executive director of Space. And I hope you all have a great time.
Thanks so much, Sue, and a huge, I'm gonna just give some snaps for Sue and all of the intensive volunteerism work that she does as our chapter chair. It's been an incredible journey through this pandemic, and I also want to quickly acknowledge the staff, Sarah Layton, Matt Cannon, Anya Wright, and Marina Bach. We started this pandemic, or we started a couple of years ago with only one staff, and we've expanded to 4, and they've really added a backbone and just an engine for passion, and are making us accomplish our wildest dreams as a chapter, and really helping activate our volunteers so that we can really be effective with legislative priorities and different community awareness, community conversations. So if you have not yet chatted with the staff, I suggest, and you want to get involved, I suggest you send an email and look them up. They're all talented activists, administrators, and humans. So we're going to start with a land acknowledgement. We are in the homeland of the Wabanaki, the people of the dawn. We extend our respect and gratitude. Oops, I missed the Zoom part. I'll go back to it. We extend our respect and gratitude to the many Indigenous people and their ancestors whose rich histories and vibrant communities include the Abenaki, Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot nations, and all of the Native communities who have lived here for thousands of generations in what is now known today as Maine, New England, and the Canadian Maritimes. This acknowledgement doesn't rectify the ongoing violence of settler colonialism, but is rather meant to cultivate an unsettling awareness of its persistence and towards building reconciliation. Sierra Club Maine is honored to collaborate with the Wabanaki as they've shared their stories and are furthering their activism for environmental justice and sovereignty. We send our thanks to the Abbey Museum for their leadership in decolonization efforts in Maine and their work to create effective land acknowledgements for organizations like ours. And we are proud to have stood this very month with the Penobscot endorsement of Yes on One, and amplifying the voices of Canadian First Nations folks who have been fighting battles against the megadams. I'm gonna, sorry, Anya, but go back to the slide with Zoom panels. So we would ask that you keep your microphone on mute. We will have some volunteers, and we have a big group of panelists tonight, so you'll hear from a lot of different voices. You're welcome to turn on your video if you feel comfortable. Please use the chat to ask questions. And if you click on that, you'll also get the box that pops up that will allow you to see a series of links to research, activism work, and other products. There is closed captioning available tonight, and we are recording this. So if you'd like to share it with friends after the fact, help us spread the word about the good work we've done. And I'm going to thank our headline sponsors, Gary Friedman Associate, Revision Energy, Maine Beer Company, Bangor Savings Bank, A Climate to Thrive, and Maine Conservation Voters. There is a whole range of other sponsors here that help make Sierra Club go and have been contributing to the resource pool that allows us to be effective and continue to build a grassroots coalition across the state of Maine for environmental justice. So thank you to all of those sponsors. We're going to actually ask to hear from a couple of them this evening. The first one is Revision Energy, which is local solar expertise you can count on. And I want to just amplify and celebrate them for being a 100% employee owned and operated company. We were supposed to have a little in-person shout out, but we had some scheduling difficulties. So there's a short video we're going to play. Thank you, Revision.
We wake up under the sun. We laugh, we play, we daydream under it. We gather our thoughts and we gather our friends under it. We stand in awe under it. Whether the days are short or stretch on forever, we all enjoy the sun. But the most important way to enjoy it today is to be energized by it. It's time. Revision Energy. Enjoy the sun.
I'm very partial to their mascot Sunsquatch as well, so not an unbiased MC here. I'm going to invite Gary Friedman up to join us. Gary Friedman and Associates is a sponsor of this evening. Gary has helped dozens of Maine nonprofits raise almost $100 million over the past 35 years and has been just an incredible engine for helping the Sierra Club Maine realize our dreams. Thank you, Gary, and I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Thank you very much, Becky. And Gary Friedman Associates is really excited to be one of the sponsors for tonight's event. We've worked with hundreds of nonprofit organizations around the state, helping them succeed. And I can say with confidence that the Sierra Club's Maine chapter is one of the most effective grassroots organizations around. And the accomplishments this year are ones that we're really proud to support. One of the reasons that we're supporting tonight is that we believe that Maine must lead the nation in terms of its capacity to get to 100% renewable energy as soon as possible, and to use the resources that we have of sun and wind and our really creative Maine workforce and technology to make Maine completely decarbonized as soon as possible. Where I am in Bar Harbor, I'm part of A Climate to Thrive, which is has been working for 6 years with the goal of making Mount Desert Island energy independent by 2030. And we've been one of the leaders in terms of solarizing our island, and we're extremely excited about the work that the Maine chapter is doing to support energy legislation and better regulations, because we need that support from the State House in Augusta and at the Public Utilities Commission for us to reach our goals. And that's the reason that I am involved with the Maine chapter, is because of the great energy work that the staff and the volunteers do. So thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to sponsor this really great event.
Thanks so much, Gary, and thanks for being a fundraising inspiration to me as well. I'm going to ask for the slide again so we can have the sweet little infographic of our successes this year. As Gary suggested, we've done a lot this year, and no short answer to also the mountain that was climbed to get to Tuesday's vote for Yes on One. One of the things that we did that is most exciting for me was stopping a mid-coast fracked gas line in just 1 month. You may have not even heard about it because the team, really went into overdrive, met with local folks, and worked to ensure that we're not adding additional fossil fuel and dirty energy gas lines here in Maine. We passed 52 ambitious environmental bills in Augusta through the legislative session, submitting testimony, and a whole bunch of volunteers and staff and ExCom members were involved with that. Thank you all. It's a pretty tremendous success for a legislative session. We passed legislation to start a green bank. We filed a lawsuit with the DOE to stop the CMP corridor. We educated over 1,000 Mainers on various environmental and social justice topics in our community conversations. We created an EIJ team of volunteers to plan to better support Black, Indigenous, and the broader spectrum of people of color. Working actively with over 100 volunteers with advocacy training and submitting testimony or making statements and getting themselves involved in the conversation. I also want to just say the staff work on the Build Back Better Act, voter rights, and the Yes on One CMP campaign. And a lot of Sierra Club volunteers have been involved with Our Power for consumer-owned utility, all really exciting work. So congratulations to everybody. We hope that these successes are thrilling to all of you as they are to us. There is just a tremendous amount of work that has gone into making this happen this year in a pandemic, no less. And we hope that you'll celebrate with us by also considering making a donation to the chapter so that we can continue doing this work and have the resources to make all this activism happen. We're really excited to share that we have 2 Patagonia prize packages this evening. And so anybody who makes a donation online, which hopefully will be a link in the chat soon before Sunday, will be entered to win. But we can't do it without you. I know it's that time of year where a lot of people get asked, but there is just so much good stuff and a lot of work ahead for us in the future. So we're celebrating the successes, but we're looking forward, and your contribution will be meaningful and help activate an entire grassroots coalition across the state. So I'm going to introduce Jonathan, who is going to do our volunteer awards. This was a very hard process this year because we have so many stellar volunteers. So I want to first say thank you to all the volunteers, and I'll hand it over to Jonathan, who's going to highlight a special group. Thank you.
Hi there, everybody. And it was definitely a very dynamic and powerful group of volunteers this year. So the choices were difficult. I just want to mention that we Sierra Club volunteers submitted testimony on 61 different pieces of legislation. We had hundreds of testimony submitted, all told. That's a record by far, and we're a real force in Augusta. And that was also partly we were able to do that because of the excellent staff which we now have. The first award for the volunteer of the year goes to Patricia Nason for extraordinary testimony in both quality and quantity. She is a force to reckon with, to be sure. She also has been organizing around federal issues, around the Build Back Better, and also started a climate action team. She is something else, and so well-deserved as volunteer of the year. And I want to pass the mic to Patricia.
Thank you, Jonathan. And you know what, honestly, I've got to thank Matt and Anya and our staff. I came in at the start of this volunteer year with not a lot of experience, not really knowing what I was doing, and I got a lot of support. And, basically just what's the next thing? What's that next bill that looks interesting that no one's working on? Can I do something on it? Why not? So for those of you who are like, I don't know if I could do that, come get involved. You can do it too.
All right, well, thank you. Patricia's brilliant. She's awesome. The next award go to outstanding volunteer, go to David Gibson. David Gibson did an enormous amount of work around the employee divestment in the state of Maine for PERS, as well as the Green Bank also known as the Clean Energy Accelerator. David has been always has some excellent ideas, a wealth of experience and knowledge that he brings to this, and just unlimited passion. So for that, he gets the outstanding volunteer, and I want to pass the mic to David.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited and appreciative of this. Like Patricia, I really need to thank our staff. Matt and Sarah and Anya and Marina have been so supportive this year and have been a huge help in everything that we've done. For those of you who don't know, the Green Bank is all about driving investment into clean energy, energy efficiency, and other climate solutions, particularly for low-income households who otherwise can't afford to insulate their homes or put solar on their rooftops. There's still more work to do, though, because the federal government hasn't yet passed the Build Back Better Act, which the latest round of it from President Biden and the House and Senate includes $29 billion for the National Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator. It's really hit home to me in the last 2 months since I've started at College of the Atlantic how important the financing is. COA set a goal 4 or 5 years ago to transition our campus entirely off of fossil fuels, not to get to net zero energy or net zero carbon emissions, but actual zero carbon emissions. And I had no idea how we were going to do that when I started, but now we're looking at borrowing several $1 million at 2% interest, and very likely we can transition mostly or entirely off of fossil fuels in the next couple of years. And I'm really excited to be leading that process, but it just reinforces for me how important it is to have financing available so that you can afford the upfront cost of these solutions that will pay for themselves over time. And I'm really excited to have had conversations with Efficiency Maine, and they're really moving forward with the Green Bank. So very excited about that. And on the other hand, LD 99, divesting Maine PERS from fossil fuels and taking money away from the fossil fuel industry, hopefully divesting from fossil fuels and reinvesting in clean energy in Maine. So anyway, thank you all. It's great to see everyone here tonight, and I'm really looking forward to the program later.
All right. One of the things I love is how many structural changing pieces of legislation volunteers and staff have really been creating in partnership with other organizations and with legislators and moving it forward. It's been a very, very exciting year. On that note, we have 2 public service for the environment awards going to legislators. The first one going to Representative Maggie O'Neill. The amazing work she did on that divestment of PERS, working with the director, working with Maine Youth for Climate Justice, just excellent, excellent work to move that forward to a success. So also passing the mic to Representative O'Neill.
Thank you so much. It's good to be with you. And I just want to start by saying that working with all of you has really inspired me about what we can accomplish when we work together. Divestment happened because so many of us across the state took time to tell legislators that we need to divest from fossil fuels. And I wanted to share that as legislators were deciding how to vote, something that they talked about was the impact that it made to have so many people, and especially young people, reach out to them in support of the bill. And divestment really wouldn't have been possible without all of us working on this together. So I really want to say thank you. And then specifically, I have to acknowledge David Gibson. I couldn't have done this without David. His expertise, his energy, and his focus really made this possible. Also young advocates, including Anna Siegel and Cole Cochran, and the whole group across the state from MICJ. They made sure that every single legislator heard from young people and heard about why this is important. It was also really important to have State Treasurer Henry Beck support the bill. It's a big deal to have your state treasurer come out and support these policies, and to have state retirees say that they didn't want their retirement savings invested in fossil fuels. And another acknowledgement is I'm a law student at Maine Law and got help from a number of profs on different bills. So Maine Law Professor Anthony Moffa helped formulate this and navigate some of the legal issues. And I just want to flag that going forward, we're going to make sure that the state leaders follow through. So right now we have a law on the book that directs the state treasurer and the state retirement system to divest by a certain date. And in the coming months, we're going to come back to you and ask for your support to help make this happen. So thank you so much, and I look forward to doing that work.
Excellent. The next public service for the environment goes to Representative Stanley Page Ziegler for his great work with the Green Bank, also known as the Clean Energy Accelerator. And again, this was his persistence on this over a couple of legislative sessions, and commitment has been instrumental in it being successful. So Paige, take it away. I think he's on, Representative Ziegler. No.
Well, I'm going to jump back in then, and maybe if he shows up, please somebody flag us and we'll give him a chance to work. Thank you to all those volunteers. Thank you, Jonathan, as well, for all your work on the Maine Climate Council and a variety of other things. We just have a really stellar group of people here that are really involved. So we're going to jump into the programmatic aspect of this evening, and we're going to try something a little bit different. We have an incredible panel of 5 folks. We have 3 different filmmakers. And so we're going to jump in and out of actually sitting ourselves in the Gulf of Maine and understanding this body of water that is raising in temperature next to us by hearing stories from the working waterfront, from hearing people that are changing industries, from people that are researching, and from people that are activists, and getting some firsthand storytelling through films. And then we'll talk to our panelists, and then look at another film, talk to our panelists again, and then close with a film. I hope it's fun and keeps it fast-paced and interesting, and kind of brings us to the places across our coast that we're talking about through the science, activism, and work. Our panel is composed of Riley Stevenson, a climate activist and an ex-com Sierra Club Maine member. She started the Coastal Youth Climate Coalition, which works near Mount Desert Island. We're also joined by Michèle LaVigne, who's Associate Professor of Earth and Oceanographic Science at Bowdoin College, an alum of Hampshire, and has a PhD in oceanography from Rutgers University. And she's currently participating in a year-long program with the American Geophysical Union for Earth scientists to find ways to apply their expertise to policymaking. Bree Warner is the President and CEO of Atlantic Sea Farms, who also was a former diplomat in Guinea, very fun fact. And since taking over as CEO at Atlantic Sea Farms in 2018, she and her team have expanded the company to work with 24 partner farmers from Portland to Eastport with over 1 million pounds of kelp annually. We will also hear from Bob Baines, a lobsterman and kelp farmer from Spruce Head Fishermen's Co-op, and a lobsterman of the FV Thrasher, his boat, and now a kelp farmer with Atlantic Sea Farms. And then our final panelist is Dr. Jason Goldenstein, who is the research director at Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve, which if you have not gone on a hike down there, I highly recommend it. But also some really neat science happening there. He's also an assistant professor at York County Community College and affiliate faculty at the University of New Hampshire School of Marine Science. So we're going to kick this off with actually a film from one of our panelists called Changing Seas, by Riley Stevenson and Matilda Allen. So let's go to the coast.
If you consider yourself a climate activist or an environmentalist and you're watching these videos, truly take the time to stop and think about the communities so often left out of the climate solution conversations that we hold. As people who care about the environment and local Maine communities, we have failed in helping these communities understand our goals, and we have failed to understand theirs. I invite you to take this opportunity to listen and truly learn from people who may be young, but have plenty of wisdom about this incredibly important issue, and have plenty to share as long as we give them the chance.
Sorry, let me try that again.
Thanks everybody for your tech patience.
Really take the time to stop and think about the communities so often left out of the climate solution conversations that we hold. As people who care about the environment and local Maine communities, we have failed in helping these communities understand our goals, and we have failed to understand theirs. I invite you to take this opportunity to listen and truly learn from people who may be young, but have plenty of wisdom about this incredibly important issue, and have plenty to share as long as we give them the chance. My name is Riley Stevenson, and I am the creator of this project. The purpose of this project is to highlight young fishermen and women in this area who are both noticing the effects of climate change and concerned about it, and sort of noting their feelings about the climate crisis and also how the situation is affecting their decisions about the future. I felt like it was really important to talk to these young people who are often really left out of the climate conversations that we have in the state. You know, at this point we are hearing quite a bit from young people, and we're hearing a bit from other communities, but we're not often listening to the voices of those who are actually spending their days on the bodies of water that are being most affected by this crisis. And I felt like it was important to draw attention to those folks and their opinions so that we can really start to draw them into the conversation and just gain a little bit more perspective about the folks who are really feeling the effects of the crisis we're currently living through. One of the reasons I wanted to do this project is because it's not the responsibility of young fishermen and women to educate us about the things that they're seeing. And so I didn't want to make it feel like a burden or a chore that was on them and their responsibility. Instead, I wanted to meet them where they were and sort of just highlight the work they're already doing and bring their opinions to the attention of the people who are decision makers and who are at the table when it comes to climate decisions, because it's important that we have a variety of perspectives and are including more of those voices which historically just haven't been present. Currently, we're standing on the shore of the Damariscotta River, which has a huge historical precedent for many types of fishing and aquaculture. As we can see, right across the river is the whaleback shell midden, which has mounds of millions of shells which were left behind by Wabanaki people thousands of years ago. This is another really important part of this project for me, because this is such an ecologically rich area, and in order to fully utilize our resources in this area, we have to be able to rely on not only the knowledge of those who were on this land before us, but also the young people who are taking over our industries and making decisions about both their own futures and the economic and ecological future of this area. These conversations have to take into account a wide variety of perspectives in order to actually craft the needed climate solutions for our small communities here in coastal Maine. I really love Maine. I've spent most of my life here on the coast of Maine, and I'm really passionate about making sure that our Maine communities are continuing to be able to thrive. And I think a really important piece of that is updating our coastal industries and also just making sure that our communities are in sync and having conversations about what the future of this place looks like. Obviously, Maine is a place that's being largely affected by the climate crisis. The Gulf of Maine is the second fastest warming body of water in the world. And because of that, so many of the industries that we know and love today are inevitably going to change. And because of that, I think it's more important than ever that we're having conversations about how to come together, bringing our communities up to speed and making sure that our communities and our individuals and our fishing industries are continuing to be able to thrive despite the threat of the climate crisis.
So my name's Nate Philbrook. I'm 18 years old, and I'm from Little Cranberry Island, and I'm a lobsterman. Like the fishery itself of lobstering has been so successful because we've worked together to try and protect the stock and protect the environment that we fish in. You know, my first memories would probably be getting on the boat on this dock and heading out to the island. And I remember just on like summer evenings with the sun setting, just going over like flat, calm waters. with like a combination of record summer of heat and then pollution runoff from farms. And that's why all the lobsters in Long Island Sound died. Definitely, it worries me to a certain extent, you know.
My name's Kaylee. I'm 18. I'm from Bremen. I've been lobstering since I was born. My dad has been a fisherman since he was born because his dad was a fisherman. Definitely the lobsters come on at different times, especially this year was super weird. I think a lot of the fishermen do really care about the ocean. A lot of people don't understand how hard the work is. Not all fun and games. It's very labor intensive. Really don't understand until you meet a family that goes lobstering and see what they do for a day or a week.
When I was 8, my grandfather got me a student license. We built a dory together, a little 16-foot plywood dory. Started with 5 traps. This is the family, trap yard, call it the field. And lobsters have been kind of moving northward. There's way less lobsters than there used to be down there. For the most part, it's a lot of fun. Definitely hard work, but if you work hard, you do well.
My name is Sarah Vanacore. I'm 22 years old and I recently graduated from the University of Maine. I studied marine science and concentrated in aquaculture, and I'm currently working at Glidden Point Oyster Farm. Climate change is a big one. In the future, yeah, it's definitely gonna take a toll on the oysters. People opposing aquaculture is also really big. This is the Damascotta River right here. It's an estuary, and so it has salt water coming in and fresh water going out. For me, my ultimate goal is to own my own oyster farm. So site selection is one of the things that I'm thinking about with climate change.
Thank you so much for that film, Riley. That's just a trailer. We'll have Riley talk in a second, but Representative Ziegler is on the call, and I just wanted to acknowledge the volunteerism and give Representative Ziegler a chance to talk.
Thank you. I had a little dog emergency, or I would have been here earlier. And she's 72 pounds, and believe me, she can be an emergency. And thanks for acknowledging the bill that I put in this last session, which I put in the session before. And I'm hoping that we can get some of the federal funding that we need, but also we can, for the bill, for the economic accelerator or green bank, whatever you want to call it. I couldn't have done it without, obviously, David Gibson. It's just the support I had as a legislator was just great. And I just want to tell people in the Sierra Club that when you do support your legislators and help us move forward, we need that. We need people being willing to do the work, to got people to help, and it's just great. And again, thanks so much for the support on that bill, and keep up the good work. And we're going to go into another session. We have quite a few bills around PFAS. We have quite a few bills. It doesn't matter how you want to look at it. Also energy. I'm in the EUT, and we were just looking at quickly a bill on setting up something analogous to the TVA, to have a government agent, quasi-government agency that'll be funding large renewable energy sources. So it's just great as we move forward. I hadn't planned to speak at all, so consequently, that was all just from the hip. Do you have any questions that you want to ask me?
No, but if you have any links, Representative Ziegler, that you want to put in the chat, feel free, or we can send them out also with the recording after the fact. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you. And my wife just gave me dinner.
Well, that's a great way to spend our celebration. I hope you'll stay on the call for more films. I'm going to pass the mic to our panelists finally. Riley, since you're the filmmaker, I hope you'll kick us off and then you can pass it to Michèle and we'll let everybody introduce themselves for about 3 to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, so I'm Riley, as you just saw in that video, and honestly rewatching it, I feel like that said a lot of the things I was going to say. So thank you, Riley of the past, but that's okay. So sort of a little bit about my time. So I just graduated from high school. I started my time as an activist around my sophomore year and have just always been really passionate about the outdoors and protecting Maine. I moved here when I was 10, so I really felt like an outsider for a lot of that time, but also felt like I had the sort of understanding of having been from away and then come here and realize what an incredibly unique place it is. And have really grown into the understanding that it's not just sort of the beautiful natural resources that make Maine what it is, but it's also the really hardy communities. And it's also the sort of setting aside really vast political differences and cultural differences and socioeconomic circumstances to create really vibrant communities. So as I sort of became an activist and got to know more other youth activists and sort of began to understand the importance and the intersectionality between climate issues and so many others. And that was really exciting to get to work on statewide issues. I'm currently working for Maine Youth for Climate Justice, and I'm also on the executive committee of Sierra Club Maine. And just sort of that type of work was always really exciting for me because obviously it's amazing work. It's so important, as we've heard here today. But as a young person, and especially someone from a small coastal rural community, it didn't always feel like that work was really helping the young activists around me. So I started the Coastal Youth Climate Coalition my junior year of high school. And that was sort of a couple months before the pandemic hit, which ended up being both a blessing and a curse, as many things have been when it comes to the pandemic. And just as a person who growing up in that environment, I recognized that the young people that I went to school with sort of didn't have outlets for a lot of the climate activism they were doing, and that it was just really important to have a larger structure for those small isolated communities. So CYCC really was able to do that, which was fantastic. And we worked on school projects, we educated students about statewide actions, hosted a lot of events, and also just really provided a place of connection for activism during the pandemic, which was really fantastic. And I believe the link to our website should be now in the chat. And I also sort of recognized during that time that the people, especially the young people who are shown in this video, were really left out of those climate conversations. As you know, young people were really at the forefront, and as we were sort of having a lot of conversations around BIPOC individuals in the state, it just also occurred to me that, you know, the young people who I showed up at school with who were wearing their clamming gear every day, like they had a lot to say about the climate crisis too, and they were really feeling the effects of the Gulf of Maine warming. And so changing seas really became this sort of idea that solidified and has been sort of the crown jewel of my time as an activist in that space so far. Just because, again, they're the young people who are really being affected. And as you saw in those teasers, those are 4 young people who have really different lives and have really different interests, and they all have super different future paths laid out for them. And those future paths are incredibly influenced by what the Gulf of Maine is going to look like 10 years from now. And all of them have sort of made choices about whether they're going to school or not, or whether they're going into aquaculture or not, based on sort of the health of our fisheries. And I just found that to be such a compelling experience and sort of aspect of climate change that we weren't really seeing as a state in these conversations. And again, that they have far more stock in the future of our oceans than many of us. I love walking along the coast, but it's not my entire livelihood. It's not how my family makes their money. So I thought it was really important to put those things together. Now I'm in the middle of a gap year after high school. This winter, I'll be traveling to Chile to nanny for a family and work on helping bring young people to the Futaleufú River, which is an incredibly beautiful other natural resource, and sort of continuing a lot of those issues around how do we help young people actually be able to experience the beautiful natural places that they're living near. And then next year I'll be at Brown University in Rhode Island and continuing to do a lot of this work. So sort of to close, I'd definitely encourage you all to watch the entirety of Changing Seas, because that's definitely not the whole picture. And there's so much more that all those young people had to say. and also just sort of to moving forward, think a little bit about how those individuals can be a part of those conversations more, especially as we're all working on climate issues together. And on that note, I'll pass it off to Michèle.
Thank you, Riley. My name is Michèle LaVigne. I'm on the faculty of the Earth and Oceanographic Science Department at Bowdoin. I'm really honored to be asked to be on this panel and share some airtime with these really inspiring youth voices that came before me. And so I thought I would just share a little bit about my research that I do at Bowdoin, and kind of connect that to some of the things that you all are working on at the Sierra Club. So I teach courses in topics related to the ocean and climate change and the geologic record of ocean change under past climate transitions. And my research here at Bowdoin has become a more and more main focus since I've been here. And so when I arrived at Bowdoin several years ago, I was invited to attend a meeting of the Maine Ocean and Coastal Acidification Partnership, which many people here are likely familiar with, that has now sort of morphed into the Maine Climate Council. But this was really my first time seeing scientists talking to lobstermen and state representatives, and many people throughout the Maine community kind of thinking about ocean science and its implications. And so I was sitting in these meetings sort of thinking about kind of what I could bring to the table. It sort of relates to one of the things one of the people in the beginning talked about, kind of thinking about what your contribution is to this issue. And so my research is in the area of paleoceanography. So I use archives from the ocean to reconstruct past climate and ocean conditions. And so I was thinking this could be something that I could bring to the table here in the state of Maine. And so one thing I was hearing from sort of the state legislators was that, there's obviously a big interest and implications for mitigating the effects of ocean acidification in the Gulf of Maine, but we're really lacking a long-term record to identify, hotspots or places that are particularly vulnerable where mitigation could come into play. And so I started working with some collaborators at other institutions. So Iowa State, the Claremont colleges in California, someone who's at UMaine at the time is now at Hamilton College, and even a geochemist colleague in the UK in Bristol. And so we wrote a proposal that was funded by Maine Sea Grant, and it was aimed at trying to specifically target data gaps that the legislators were looking for. And so we're kind of in the middle of this project right now. We're using the chemical signatures that are preserved in layers of clams and coral and algae. And so I actually have an example of one of these clams here. So this is an Arctica Icelandica clam. It's one of the longest lived organisms in the ocean. It can live for several centuries. And you could see that there are these little layers in each of these, in these clams. You can kind of see it on the outside here. And so every time one of those layers is laid down, it's about a year's worth of growth. And as they grow, they incorporate the chemical signatures into the climate signatures as chemical kind of fingerprints into those layers. And so we've been working to kind of use this as another way of extending the data that we have for measuring temperature, but also pH in the Gulf of Maine. And so this is kind of an example of the sort of research that I'm doing, but particularly interested in how that can be used to address some of these kind of gaps in the policy area. And so I wanted to kind of point out that in the chat, I think they'll drop a few links to some organizations that are, I think, are really great resources where we have scientists working together with policymakers, and you can sign up for some newsletters and to get some indications on when there are specific bills on the table. And I know the Sierra Club does a lot of this as well, obviously, as we just heard, but looking for places where we can really see scientists working together with policymakers and the stakeholders. There's some nice examples of that. Here, Friends of Casco Bay and the Maine Climate Council are some really great examples for where to look for some of those resources. So I think in the introduction, they mentioned that I've been kind of thinking about how I can use my position and background in this science to work in this area as well. I don't know who goes after me. So.
Thank you so much, Michèle. I can't wait to hear more from you. We're going to invite Bree of Atlantic Sea Farms up.
Oh, hi, everyone. I have someone joining me today. Thank you very much for having me tonight. It's really incredible what you guys are doing and everything that you're building in the state. And really proud to be here today. Also really proud to be here with my colleague, Bob Baines, who we work with very closely in the lobster industry, and excited to hear him talk. I am Bree Warner. I'm the CEO and president of Atlantic Sea Farms. We are a first to market kelp company based here in Maine. Our whole mission and reason for being is based around some of the problem statements, the challenge statements, and the opportunity statements the challenge statements that you guys have already talked about, but also around some of the opportunity statements that we see here. Here on the coast of Maine, as you know, the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of oceans in the world, which has already been mentioned. And we are singularly dependent on one fishery, and that's lobster. And that was not always the case. You know, I think anyone who knows the coast 20, 30 years ago, there were many species that people were fishing in year round. People were fishing for lobster, but also ground fish and shrimp and scallops and a number of other different fisheries. And now we're down to one. And that one fishery has been incredibly well conserved by those who fish it. We have rules put in place by that fishery, which Bob can speak to better than me, that preserve the breeding populations, that keep an upper and lower size limit. It's an owner-operator fishery, and it's one of the most conservation-minded fisheries in the country. Nonetheless, with the water warming faster than most oceans in the world, we are concerned in the state, and the lobster fishery is concerned as well, that those lobster larvae may have a harder time surviving into the future at the same rate that they are today. Now, is lobster going away? I hope not. And, there's no indication that it is going away, but there's certainly increased volatility year over year with climate change. And that volatility makes our coastal communities incredibly vulnerable given their incredible reliance on just one fishery. So kelp farming and aquaculture in general, whether it's mussels or shellfish or scallops or kelp, can help diversify people's income stream in the face of climate change. And I really want to think about like what that means right now. Everyone's talking about in the face of Glasgow, like the climate change and the ways that we can adapt to climate change. But often what we talk about when we talk about climate change is, hey, coal's gone, let's transition these workers to solar, as if it's even remotely the same skill set. It is not. But with aquaculture here in the state of Maine, we have 4,000 plus lobster license holders. They are all incredibly skilled on the water. They're incredible mariners, or most of them are, and they have lots of infrastructure, including boats. And they're not, most of them aren't fishing as much in the winter as they are during the summer season. And that is when you talk about climate change adaptation, taking people who are working on the water, helping them lean into their own incredible skill set with their existing capital and their existing equipment, and making it a more climate change friendly, viable supplemental income source to their lobster fishery is really what we need to be talking about when we talk about climate change adaptation and moving on in a new world of an increasingly volatile climate and all of the things that come with the natural resource-based economies based around the natural environment. So we are kelp company based in Maine. As I said, we produce fresh kelp products. What we do is we partner with fishermen along the coast to grow kelp in their off season. We provide them with free seed and a buyback guarantee. And that is done in the winter. It's a winter season. So it's done as a counter seasonal income source to their lobster season. And then we turn that kelp into high value products across the country that are now in Whole Foods across the country, Sprouts, Moms, Wegmans, retailers across the country, as well as fast casual chains as well. And what we're really excited about is we're growing the lion's share of line grown seaweed in the United States. And that is being grown and led by Maine fishermen. So when we talk about like hearing voices of fishermen, sometimes it's not about hearing the voices, it's looking at the actions. And the actions of our Maine coastal fishermen show that they are the leaders in climate change adaptation and aquaculture adaptation. Kelp also helps to mitigate some of the effects of climate change, but man, this adaptation and continued resilience of this owner-operator fishery has been staggering and exciting. And I'm proud to be from the state where all of this industry is growing right before our eyes. As we're all talking about climate change all the time, these fishermen are actually doing something about it, and that's really exciting.
Thank you so much, Bree. And we're gonna, with that, it's a great intro to Bob, who is one of the contributing fishermen who has made this resilient switch to also adding kelp into his aquaculture and seafooding. Bob, can we invite you up to speak? Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I've been a commercial fisherman for 45 years now. A little bit of groundfish early on, but I've been a lobster fisherman and a scalloper during the winter for over 40 years now. First, I want to say the lobster industry, we have a very sustainable industry. With there's over 3,000 full-time lobstermen on the coast with sternmen, dock workers. It's an extremely important part of the coastal Maine and the communities. And it's in good shape, but it has changed. It's changed significantly in the 40 plus years that I've been involved due to climate change, no question. When I started fishing back in the mid-late 70s, wintertime, the harbors froze over. You have to break ice to get out to your boat. Last winter, the water temperature never went below 38 degrees. That's huge in a 40 plus year time frame. This year, the water temperature didn't go up as it has in past summers, but it hasn't gone down. In the last month, we've only gone down a few degrees. It's 56, 57 degrees surface temperature offshore here in Spruce Head. I have had a temperature probe, as I think there's 30 or 40 lobstermen up and down the coast who put temperature probes in their traps. We work with a scientist down in Woods Hole, Jim Manning, and it just records the bottom temperature and you put it back in the same place year after year, and it's showing significant changes on the bottom temperature as well. So with that said, the lobster fishery offshore has grown tremendously. It was a very small fishery 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now it's significant. The 1,000, 1,200 federal permit holders who fish the offshore fishery really depend on this, and it's a significant part of their income. That didn't exist 30 years ago. I think it's the future of our industry. As Bree mentioned, I transitioned. This is my third year as a kelp farmer. In fact, today I just got through the door at 5:30, ran through the shower so I could be on this. I constructed my kelp farm today. One thing I want to point out about kelp farming, it's not easy. For the fishermen who know how to work with rope and have the gear to do it, it's still very challenging. It's what I call three-dimensional farming, because you're working in anywhere from 30 to 50 feet of water. You have tides, you have wind. Most of the guys who are doing it, they fish on one side of a shore or another. So you can only work in good weather or certain types of weather. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity. It really is. As I said, I go scalloping during the winter time. I take a few days, 3 or 4 days in November to construct my farm, to seed my farm. And if I do it correctly, it just grows over the course of the winter. And then usually by early March, kelp really starts growing. And we harvest, I harvest in May. And it's a great way to have a spring income, because my spring income lobstering has been very small over the last number of years compared to what it was. That's a big change. So it's an opportunity to give. Right now, there's 24 of us. I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years from now, there's going to be, double that, triple that. There's a lot of opportunity there. And at 65 years old, I don't think I'm going to be doing it for another 20 years, but I've partnered with my nephew, who's only 40 years old, and we're going to transition him right into it and hopefully figure out how to do this really well, so other fishermen can do it also. And I'd love to share what I've learned, and I've learned a lot over the last 3 years. And I think it has a lot of promise for coastal communities.
Thank you so much, Bob. It's really inspiring to hear about it, and just thank you for your resilience. The Guardian article that was put in the chat, I highly recommend everybody click on it. I hope you'll keep watching with us, but do read it later. It's an incredible profile on Bob's work. And last but not least, I'm going to invite Dr. Jason Goldstein from the Wells Reserve up to introduce his work, from lobsters to lobster backpacks and more.
Thanks, Kelsey. Some of you may have seen our story on Maine 207 recently. These lobster backpacks has caused quite the stir, because we get lots of feedback from lobstermen like Bob, and mostly good, not always. But with that, I'll just reintroduce myself again. I'm the research director at the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve in Wells, Maine, right here down here in York County. And so it's kind of a tongueful, the where I work. And so what we do, we are a network of 29 nationally recognized reserve systems. It includes Hawaii, Alaska, and there'll be a 30th reserve coming online in 2022 in the state of Connecticut. So we're really excited about that. Our number one goal, we're partnered with NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. That's where we're funded through. And as such, we take guidance and work with them very closely. But at the end of the day, we're really focused, our reserve is focused on Maine-centric climate issues. And nothing could be more closer to home for us than being on connected to the Gulf of Maine. So all our rivers, estuaries, watersheds, they all lead into the Gulf. And as we've heard quite a few times already, our Gulf of Maine is changing. It's changing not just in temperature, that's one way it's changing, but there's many other things that are changing in the Gulf of Maine. We have a vibrant lobster fishery because we have outstanding self-management by the industry itself and by the fishermen, which is just amazing. You don't see that in any other fishery in the world. But we're still, really just challenged by a lot of these other issues. So here at the Wells Reserve, we have a huge laundry list of projects and research that we're involved with. And the science is really the pinnacle of what we do. So we're out there in the trenches, we're out scuba diving and sloshing around in marshes and estuaries and pulling lobster traps and tagging green crabs and finding, new species that have range expansions into our Gulf of Maine. And we're just trying to understand and collect that data and put that forward to translate that into management decisions. So we work really closely. We have a stewardship arm, we have an education piece at our reserve, and we have a coastal training program component. Every reserve has that, whether you're in Maine, Louisiana, Alaska, Hawaii, whichever reserve you're at. The other thing that really links all our reserves together, including Maine, is a program called our system-wide monitoring program, where we're monitoring short-term variability and long-term change in our coastal systems. We do that with a series of instruments that are measuring many different parameters of water quality. We just started monitoring ocean acidification. We're one of the first places in Maine to do that. We're really excited to be able to partner. We partner with a whole host of academic institutions, fishermen, local groups, et cetera, the town itself. So I know I could go on and on, but we're really interested in connecting our work with the rest of Maine. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Wells Reserve is a very special place and a very cool laboratory. I'm going to hand it over to Anya, who's going to screen our next film called The Gilded Trap by Ashley Siana. And when we come back, we'll just answer a few questions with our panelists, and then we have a very short film to close out the evening. Thank you all.
I take a lot of pride in what I do. Being a Maine lobsterman is a very special thing if you live in Maine, because you are Maine. You're on the ocean every day harvesting Maine lobster. You're not just doing this for the money. You do it because you love the job. You enjoy what you do. You take a lot of pride in your work, in your knowledge that you've built in the past. When you see your success and your fishing do well, it makes you feel good about yourself and your life. My name is Jamie Hollowell, and I've been a commercial lobsterman in the state of Maine for about 19 years. I've started lobstering with my dad when I was about 6. I always looked up to him, and going lobstering was just one thing that brought us closer together. I always loved being by the ocean, and once I realized that I could make money and be on the ocean every day, then I found the career that I really enjoyed.
Jamie and I've known since he was a kid. He's best friend of my son, Ryan. He's on the board of directors, the Maine Lobstermen's Association. He's in the leadership at the Bristol Co-op. I have confidence that he'll move forward in this fishery.
I like watching how the lobster industry has evolved from year to year, and I enjoy the freedom of being my own boss. You have to be self-motivated in this business. This job is very, very time-consuming. It's back-breaking. You really have to put your all into it. Lobster fishing can be the worst job in the world, and it can be the best job in the world. There are days you go out and you wish you'd gone home 5 minutes after you left. Then there's other days you just don't want to come home because you're catching 5, 6, 7 pounds to a trap, and you're having the time of your life, and the day's beautiful, and you're on the water. It is our main economy on the coast of Maine. It's the total roots of our living. There's more to just going out and hauling traps and catching lobsters. There's a way of life, and it's a love for the ocean. Every year varies, but one thing's for certain is it's very unpredictable when it comes to what the catch is going to be.
We've seen the Western Atlantic warming faster than much of the global ocean, and in fact the Gulf of Maine has been warming about 4 times faster than most of the globe's oceans. By some estimates, the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of the world ocean. So why is it warming so fast? It's a combination of not only the global warming effects of increasing CO2, but the impact that that has on accelerating levels of warming in the tropics that enhance the Gulf Stream, these southern currents that come up along the East Coast, along with the slowdown of the chilling effect on those waters as they move north. So it's almost as if you've taken the taps on the bathtub and taken the cold water and turned it down, and the hot water and turned it up. The Gulf of Maine and New England are on this balance point between the adverse effects of warming and the positive effects of warming. We've been seeing both the collapse of the fishery in southern New England and the explosion of the fishery in the Gulf of Maine. It's been such an explosion that it's elevated the entire U.S. fishery to its current status as the most valuable single species fishery in the nation now. But we're also seeing in the Gulf of Maine a fishery that's largely reliant on this single species right now. And that creates some perilous dependencies in that many of these fishermen are geared up only for lobster. And one of the big things that concerns me is that the younger fishermen have never known anything other than an increasing fishery. They've heavily invested in large horsepower boats that are helping them harvest huge volumes now. But the big concern is whether they're overcapitalized, and when things start turning down for them, whether that'll be a sustainable business model to have such a large boat, such debt. Jamien's an example of one of these younger fishermen, and he's one of the guys I really worry about.
Larry lives in a fishing village on the coast of Maine. White gulls soar above his house and perch on the rooftop. From his window, he can see the harbor full of fishing boats. And everywhere, lobster traps are piled high on the wharves and in the yards. Larry has been helping his father ever since he was old enough to drive a nail straight. And this year, he makes a trap for himself. One morning in May, they make their first trip out to set their traps. So this book, it pretty much inspired me to become a lobsterman at a young age. Actually, my mom read this book to me nightly, but she had crossed out the kid's name in the book and replaced it with my name. And it kind of told the story of what I wanted my life to be like and how I wanted to lobster with my dad. She's got the dog, my mom, me, my dad. There's a lot less in my generation that's lobstering now. When I started, I had about 50 traps when I was about 10 years old. By the time I was about 13 to 14, I had 150 traps. There were a lot of people that said you shouldn't buy a boat because the lobster industry is very unstable, and they are right about that. But the lobster industry has always been an unpredictable fishery, like any fishery. And I think we need young people to get started in the lobster industry for it to have a future.
We have great collaborations with our local fishermen, and they've informed much of our science. They're out there every day. They're probably some of the best naturalists out there. So this is one of our egg-bearing females. And look at all those eggs there. We have tanks with small females, and we've got tanks with big females. And the question here in this particular case is to see if small egg-bearing females have lower quality eggs. The reason we're interested in that question is that one of the consequences of warming climate is a reduction in the size at maturity for lobsters. It's well known that larger females produce more eggs, but it's unclear how maternal size affects egg quality.
Realistically, we are like scientists because we see every day what's going on in the lobster population, how they're shedding or where they are in the ocean at certain times of the year. So our collaboration with scientists is very important. Every year in this business is different. This year, 2019, we're suffering from a bait crisis. I think that the herring are in a different pattern maybe than they used to be in, and it's definitely been harder for the fishermen to catch. That's caused the price of bait to go up quite a bit. Climate change could have a lot to do with the decline in the population of herring. Maybe we're in a cycle that we're just going to get out of, but if the lobster population completely did crash, it would be complete and total devastation along the coast of Maine. It's fishing though. It's not catching, it's fishing, so it's unpredictable. But I think within the near future, our industry is in good shape when it comes to our resource, and generally we try the best we can to make sure lobsters thrive here.
So V-notching is a really important conservation measure implemented originally in Maine almost 100 years ago. Basically, the idea is to mark proven breeders in the population and then protect them even when they're within the legal harvesting size slot. So that means if a lobsterman captures a female lobster, if it has eggs, is required to throw it back, but it'll also notch the tail with a little mark. And that way, after it's shed its eggs and it's harvestable, if it has that mark, it's illegal to harvest.
V-notching has been one of the biggest conservation efforts by the Maine lobster industry. This ensures that no one can ever keep this lobster and that it'll always be a breeding female. I don't think V-notching is all the future, but I think it certainly helps when you have a majority of female lobsters going back into the ocean, given the chance to lay eggs. And this is probably the best thing that fishermen can do.
And when Larry climbs into bed that night, he lies awake a while. He thinks about all the many different kinds of fishing, and he says to himself, I could fish with nets for herring or mackerel. I could work on a big dragger catching redfish or flounder or haddock. I could be a tuna fisherman or even a clam digger. But of all the kinds of fishing there are, I think lobstering is the most fun, so I'm going to be a lobsterman when I grow up. And that is the end. It's like all this talking makes me really think about like what my life. You know what I mean? Like
Wow, just an incredibly beautiful film that really takes us there and shows the insider perspectives. So I am going to invite our speakers and we'll try to keep this part brief. We do have one little 4-minute film to close. But we brought together a panel of very different people, researchers, activists, and scientists. And so this question, I hope you can answer it from your individual fields. What's the biggest change in your field of work in the past couple of years? And that could be related to climate change, or it could be about technology and how information is shared. What's changing and what's exciting you?
I'll start. I would say that as a youth activist, I think there's just been a lot more attention paid to youth in the past few years. And with like so many of the successes that were spoken about earlier in the legislative world, so much of that was done with a lot of youth firepower. And I think there's just a lot more taking young people seriously and at our word, and sort of climate activists being taken more seriously generally, and being able to get a lot more done and a lot more respect from the general public, which was a good change.
Thanks, Riley.
I can go next. I think that one of the key ways that I see my field shifting in exciting directions, technology is expanding rapidly, and, we're getting more and more data that help us understand kind of the mechanisms at play. But I think kind of along with those advances, we're also seeing an increased sense of urgency from the scientists, and more people looking for ways that they can not just do really great science, but connect with the stakeholders and communicate their research out beyond scientific audiences. And so I think that that is an important and exciting change.
Thanks. And thanks for being with us here tonight as part of that.
I'll speak up now. Obviously, the big change in the lobster fishery, as has been mentioned, is the resource moving offshore. Rick Wally spoke to it. Jamie spoke to it. I've known Jamie since for many years. I'm on the board of the Maine Lobster Association as well. And it's going to continue to change. And how far do we have 3 years? Do we have 23 years? Do we have 60 years? But the lobster fishery, as climate change will continue, we more than likely will not have the lobster fishery, in the future that we have today. And so, what do the current fishermen, especially the younger fishermen, do to transition to other fisheries? Because there's fisheries, on the mid-Atlantic that will come our way. So it's all being able to adapt, to be able to see it coming, and inevitably do what you need to do as a fisherman to make a living.
For me, aquaculture here in Maine, like 4 years ago, could fit into the entire Portland Jetport. I think just when we talk, or 2 years ago, when we talk about like aquaculture is so big here in Maine, that means literally the size of the Portland Jetport. And I think there has been increased thinking around how aquaculture can be an agent for positive change and adaptation in the face of climate change. And aquaculture can provide some of the most sustainable and climate-friendly foods you could possibly eat, shellfish and seaweed. And I think that attitude toward aquaculture has changed dramatically. I'd like to have it change even more. And I'd like to just kind of have a call to action here with this group of folks watching is, if you live in Maine and there's an aquaculture lease that comes up around you, if you can see it from your house, that's great. Don't try to block it because you don't want to see an oyster farm or a mussel farm or a seaweed farm. And I think we as agents of change that want to make for a better planet, that includes in our own backyard. And I think it's seen, I've seen some real positive moves in Maine on aquaculture, but I've also seen some negative moves of, wealthy landowners on the coast who don't want their view bothered by aquaculture. So I think I would just say there's kind of some real positive change and some real negative in aquaculture. And I would just encourage us as a group of people and as agents of change to continue to lean into that, because that coast is changing, as we all know. And if we're not adapting with it, we're going to find ourselves in a very precarious situation.
Thanks for that inspiring note. Jason, do you want to round us out?
Sure, yeah, I'll try to keep it quick. I think the comments have been great. I think for us and for me, the challenge for us is learning new science, learning the biology of new species. Where we're located, we're sort of at the cusp of what I call range expansions for certain species. So here's, if you guys can see this is the newest kid on the block in our area. That's a blue crab, as in like Chesapeake blue crabs. We've gotten lots of them in our marsh now. We're inundated with green crabs. So our goal is to try to understand the biology and the nuances with these new species. How do they interact with lobster? How are they, can we create fisheries? Can we, capitalize on this and make it worthwhile? So I think for us, it's understanding how that change manifests in the biology. And as a trained lobster biologist, you know, we're learning new organisms all the time. We have dozens of new invasive species, and we just don't understand how they work in the Gulf of Maine.
Thanks. And if I can put you on the spot for the next question too, maybe you could give us a second topic, because we were going to ask you, what is an environmental issue facing any part of the Gulf of Maine that you want more Mainers to be aware of, big or small? But that blue crab fact is something that I did not know. So thank you for sharing that with me. That's boggling my mind.
We didn't know about it either.
What else should we be paying attention to? And then to all the rest of the panelists as well.
Yeah, okay, I'll go first and then hand it off to the next person. I think we need to be aware of the rate of change. Okay, so that was how we know we've got temperature changes. We know we have changes in the chemistry of our ocean with ocean acidification. We know we have issues with nutrient runoff. But I think for some of these things, the rate at which they've happened is really mind-blowing to me. And so with people that I talk to a lot, you know, climate deniers, which I purposely put myself in, you know, try to talk to those, have conversations with those types of people. They say, you know, their argument is, well, climate change happens all the time. Like the whole earth is changing all the time. They're totally correct about that. The difference is the rate at which things are changing are, you know, just so significant and alarming. And that's the problem. So the organisms, the ecosystems, you know, the seaweeds, the lobsters, all these things, can they really keep up with that change? It's sort of like keeping up with the Joneses, right? You've got to keep up with that hot water tap that keeps turning on faster and faster. So that we don't know the answer to that. And bringing it back to lobsters, we know lobsters are going to continue to move. They're going to change. They're very adaptable. But is there a point where their threshold is going to be met and they're not going to be able to do anymore, like in southern New England? So that's sort of where I think that's what I'd like people to be aware of, is that the rate of change.
I'll just speak to that as well. I mean, what Jason said is certainly correct, and I mentioned it earlier. In my lifetime of fishing, which is, you know, 40 plus years, it's been incredibly fast, the changes, and it's not going to slow down, not in my lifetime or my nephew's fishermen and all these, and Jamie, and you know, it's not going to slow down. You can't stop it that fast. So what do you do as a commercial fisherman? You have to learn to adapt. Aquaculture is one certainly way to adapt. Other fisheries, possibly. I don't know. I'm hopeful that the, you know, communities on the coast of Maine will continue to thrive, but it's challenging. It's going to be challenging, and to hear the young fishermen, you know, really paying attention now, I think that's a positive, because you need to know what's coming down the road, so you can be ready yourself for it. So I'm hopeful, but I'm a little bit concerned. No, I'm a lot concerned.
Yeah, I was going to say, honestly, right along those lines, I think less an environmental concern, but more a human concern. Just how many young people I spoke to who didn't really have backup plans, I found so interesting and sort of concerning in the light of the fact that things are changing and how many of them realize that and recognize that, but we're still not going to go to college or not sort of have another plan in place, and just sort of keep making money until they couldn't anymore. I think also in that regard, there is a lot of hope for really important programs and really helpful things coming down the pipe. But I think just being aware of how many young people have sort of fallen into that, I think is an important issue not a lot of folks are aware of.
I'll just chime in and say one thing that I often talk about with my students relates to this issue of rate of change. You know, we look at geologic records of climate in the past, and over millions of years, we have no analog for the rate of change that we're experiencing right now is unprecedented in our geologic record when we look at some of these things like ocean acidification in particular. But I think it's also important to note that, like, yes, we have, you know, we're experiencing these changes, and you know, we will experience change to some degree, but it's not necessarily absolute. Like, we're on a spectrum in terms of, I think sometimes we read the news coming out of the IPCC report and what, you know, the scientists are focusing on this 1.5 degree Celsius benchmark, which is useful for kind of putting hard numbers on things, but, you know, swaying away a little bit from the alarmist response to that, I think, and recognizing that there's a spectrum. So like every step that we take and every mole of carbon that we keep out of the atmosphere will be in a step in the right direction to help feel like there's some change that can be useful.
You want to close us out with something micro or macro?
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of to what Michèle said, you know, I think often when we talk about climate change, we talk about fear, and we talk about sort of gloom and doom, which in fact it is. It's a very serious issue, as we all know. And we also all know that nobody listens when you approach them with fear, and nobody listens when you approach them in the face of despair. It's a great way to back people into corners, and it's a great way to demotivate any potential action. And I think what we see right now is also a whole lot of hope. And Riley, I'm just going to push back on what you said a little bit. Like, everybody knows what's going on in the water out there. They might not all express it in the same way, but they see the changes. And I think we need to look at the lobster fishery as a piece of hope. Like, the fishery could have been gone. It's not. It's still thriving. It's still out there. And a lot of people are really embracing a different future, and they're conserving their own fishery in a way that's been pretty tremendous. And when we recruit partner farmers, we don't come to them and say, climate change is going to kill your fishery, you should come farm with us. We say, hey, you have this big boat, you're in one fishery, like, here's another fishery for you to work on in the winter when you're not lobstering hard, and let's figure out if we can partner together. And then 2 or 3 years later, people say, you know, like, we're also making we're also reducing some ocean acidification. That's really cool, but that's not what we lead with. And because it doesn't matter. That's not how you get people to make positive change in life in general, not just climate change. So I just think if we can kind of look from a place of hope, there's some really hopeful things going on in the coast right now. And I think that's exciting. And I think Maine is leading the way in a lot of really quiet ways that people don't even see, because we don't approach it like folks in California. We approach it like we do in Maine, and we do it quietly, and we do it with our heads down. And that in itself is really hopeful.
Thanks, Bree. I want to be very conscious of time. We did say this program was going to close. We're going to screen one more film, which will have just a wonderful resonance with, I think, what we were just talking about. And it's 4 minutes long. If anybody has any burning questions for all of the panelists, not just one, please put them in the chat, and we'll have one final question before we close. But with that, I turn it over to Anya, who's going to screen The Sea Farmers.
Kind of tedious work. Do it over and over. Get down to the bottom. 2 more. There it is. I remember a few years ago, the megabucks was really, really high. And I was like, I bought a ticket. But I said, if I win, I'm not going to quit my job. Like, it would be great, have my winters off, travel, do whatever. But I would never give up lobstering.
There's guys here that will probably come back from the grave and if they could, and they'd go haul their traps.
My family's been here, I guess, since 1888, fixing up boats, working on lobster boats and fishing. That's all we know.
Tell us about your dad.
I love my dad. Oh no. Everybody looks up to my dad and everybody trusts him. He's respected and knowledgeable. If you have a boat problem or a car problem, he just knows how to do a lot of things. When I first started talking kelp farming, I don't think he was on board at all. He was pacifying me and shaking his head. Yeah, okay.
Wouldn't make any difference what she wanted, I'd help her.
I don't think that he thought that anything would ever come of it. He's just gonna help me set the gear and then that's it. Then he's out because he doesn't want to try anything new. The first time that I brought kelp seed home and he looked at it and he was like, there's nothing on that.
You know, there was a little discoloration there, but it didn't look like anything growing on it to me. I thought it would come, you know, probably a quarter of an inch long or something.
I'm like, yeah, Dad, it's microscopic. You can't see it.
Yeah, there's a little slime growing on it, you know. So, that don't look good to me.
You could see the seed line that was wrapped around would just lightly turn brown. And I was like, I was all excited. He was like, that's nothing. That's nothing.
That's just slime is growing on everything. And then pretty soon we went over there one day, and I'll be goddamn, there was kelp about 3 or 4 inches long. You could have knocked me over with a feather.
He was like, wow, we are growing kelp. And I was like, whew. He said, we're growing kelp. He likes the idea now that he's actually growing something and it's not just slime.
I was wrong. I had been once or twice before.
We've done a lot of things together, and this is just one more thing that I can share with my kids and keep it going. I now have an aquaculture business growing kelp with my dad, my partner in crime.
Thank you all so much for sharing that with us. We have one question from the audience, and then I'll give one big general question. Can anybody answer Margaret's question, which is, what are the former lobster fishermen in Southern New England doing to adapt anything else besides kelp farming or aquaculture as alternatives?
I'll give an answer. I just worked on this real quick. So they're adapting by, in some cases, switching to other species. One in particular is Jonah crab, and there are some guys who have because Jonah crab are caught in a mixed in with lobsters in the same trap style. So guys are either harvesting whole Jonah crab or claw only, and there is a market for it. And so that's one of the things that I think is interesting about climate change, is being able to adapt by capitalizing on underutilized fisheries in a sustainable way. And so again, we need to understand how to do that. We need to understand the biology and the science before people start, reaping that in, but that is something that is happening in southern New England.
Thanks, Jason. So we're going to close with a question of hope, which could be as fantastical or as simple as a number that you'd like us to hit in a scientific measurement. But what is each of your dreams for Maine's coastal future?
For me, I think it's a lot about sort of just communities where the activists and people who are concerned about environmental issues and also the lobstermen are really united in preserving our waterways and sort of have come to the realization that we're all really fighting for the same thing and are stewards of the same ocean. And just communities where a lot of that resilience is sort of passed around and shared as opposed to siloed the way that it tends to be now. And more films like that.
I'll come at it from the more realist point of view. I know truly hundreds of fishermen up and down the coast, and I've learned so much from them. And especially the younger guys, they are going to just give it their all and get up in the morning and go to work. And if something doesn't, work out, they're going to get up the next morning and go to work. So, we're very fortunate. I mean, Maine fishermen are very fortunate that we've made the living that we've made. I believe we will continue, to be able to make the living that we made. It's so expensive now, but what isn't? And we'll just adapt. We'll adapt, and there will be a future. Will it be the same as it is now 50 years from now? No, but there's hope. We're going to persevere and go to work and adapt, and I think we'll be fine. That's my hope.
And mine is, one thing that people love about Maine is these working waterfronts that are everywhere. If you go to Washington, if you go to California, if you go to most of Massachusetts, all of Connecticut, you don't see those working waterfronts anymore. And what they are indicative of is successful, thriving, working waterfront communities and the people who work on those working waterfronts. And my hope is that we continue, people still come to Maine and people still live in Maine because they want to go to a place that feels authentic and real and not like a rich person's playground, but like a place where people work and make a living off the water in 50 years. I want my grandkids to see the same coastline that we see today, and with the same focus on working people on the water.
Hear, hear. Michèle?
So I think mine is for a coastline that's plastered with sensors for things like temperature and pH and oceanographic measurements, and that there's funding in place to support the sorts of collaborative research projects like we kind of saw in some of the films from organizations like Maine Sea Grant, where we can really kind of bring scientists together with folks from the aquaculture industry or fishing industry to make use of the data information we can get from our coastline.
I think for me, it's really simple. Diversity equals stability. So you have a diversity. I'd love to see all the fisheries, some of the fisheries that we don't have anymore, like shrimp. I'd like to see those healthy as lobster is now. And that diversity gives us the stability in the ecosystem. That stability in the ecosystem gives us the great Maine coastal communities that we currently have, and hopefully not ever condos and things like high-rise apartment buildings if fisheries crash. So, and I'd love to see the lobster fishery keep thriving because that pays for a lot of my research. So I don't want to see lobsters disappear because I'll be very bored.
Well, I think we all have our own reasons, but I also didn't know how that one of the films, that blue glove with the little lobster, was just the cutest thing. So thank you all so much. We have two really exciting hikes on Saturday, November 6th at 10 a.m. in Falmouth, which will also have Jesse from Atlantic Sea Farms joining. And at 3 p.m. in Kittery, they're going to put the links to register for them in the chat, or if you know other folks that want to get together with a group of like-minded folks and talk about the environment and what we see as we walk around this great state of Maine. Thank you all. I know it went a little over, but it was so enriching to be in the coast and hear stories from the coast. We have a new volunteer orientation on December 15th at 12 p.m. If you've heard anything that you're interested in, thank you to all those volunteers that won awards, but we'd love to get people more involved and to continue to build our grassroots space so that we can keep being impactful in Augusta and beyond. And lastly, we hope that you'll either donate or write your reps, do an action tonight. The links will be in the chat on writing your senator, writing your representative, find an issue that starts to tackle the climate crisis that you're passionate about. This is how we get stuff done here in Maine, and we're having an impact because of all of you who are revved up and ready to go. And I think the last link you'll get is just an ask for a year-end gift for the Sierra Club Maine. And reminder that you could win that Patagonia gift if you donate by Sunday. So thank you for all you do, whether you write letters or donate. And thanks for joining us tonight. And thank you to all the panelists. That was very interesting and inspiring. Good night.
Thank you.